"You're late," said Isabella. "My watch says I'm early," I answered. "My phone is right." "Your life is slow. Your watch belongs in a museum," she said, meaning my life. "If you come to the hotel, call first, so you can clear the lobby of unapproved fathers." "So we avoid scenes," she said. "My upbringing keep me honest," I said. "It fits me like an old shoe." Liam laughed too loudly for the size of the room. "That's your father, is he?" If this story is resonating with you, if you can feel that tension in your own chest, I have a small request. Follow the channel. It's not just a click, it's a signal. It's you telling me, keep going. Bring me more of this. Every single follow is a push that helps me continue to find and share stories that aren't just told, they're felt. Stories that truly stay with us. Now, where was I? Yes, the philosopher of produce. He had a way of making the air applauding him. He performed dinner the way some men perform grief-broad gestures. Well-rehearsed lines, no smudges on the cuff. The Croft Grand Vancouver was only 4 blocks from their condo, and he spoke as though the lobby had followed him home and laid its marble forehead on his table. The chairs were slick-backed and minimal, the kind that force you to sit like a candidate begging for votes. Isabella, somewhere along the way, had learned to serve water with lemon slices floating like halos. I took one and pushed it aside. Lemon fights with tea. Tea ought to be respected. "Dad," she said, "Sophia drew something for you." Her voice softened on the corners when she mentioned her daughter. That softness? There was my proof. She still remembered the world before polished stone. She stood, slipped from the table, and returned with a sheet of paper that smelled faintly of her perfume, of hotel linens, and a memory of apples. Sophia had drawn me with a hat I never wear and a house wider than my street. She'd given me a smile big enough to swallow a bus. My granddaughter slid into the space between my chair and the wall and pressed her cheek to my arm. "You look happy, Papa Henry," she said. She was 8 then, the age of bright pencils and unearned apologies. "I am happy," I said, which was almost true. I was pleased to be mistaken for happy. The drawing had the honesty of crayon, blunt, flat, unapologetically bright, no shading for doubt. I wanted to tuck it into my jacket, but Isabella had already framed it in her head for the refrigerator. In her world, even affection required a display unit. Liam raised his glass. "To family," he said, "and to dreams realized." He made eye contact with each of us, just long enough for me to feel the heat of his certainty. Outside the window, Vancouver had plastered itself with dusk, the skyscrapers lining up like teeth. The city does that aligns itself to bite. I raised my glass of tea. Isabella's Chardonnay was the shade of congratulation. "To dreams," I said, "because I have learned you can toast anything if you keep your voice even. The illusion of the first time is that we haven't had this dinner before. The brutal kindness on my daughter's face. Liam's showy magnanimity, my body answering to their chairs, their cutlery. The long table that denied there had ever been a kitchen table, where a girl once asked me if dolls dream of anything but better dresses. We play new roles on old stages and call it novelty because the walls have been painted again. Halfway through, the doorbell rang. The sound didn't belong to the condo. It was a sound borrowed from the hotel, cheerful and false as a lobby piano. Isabella stood and brushed invisible crumbs from her dress. "Excuse me," she said, and returned with an envelope held between her fingers like a glass slide to be examined. "Special delivery," she said, amused. "For you, Dad." It was thick, creamy paper, the kind that imagines itself whispering in English accents. The Croft Grand crest was embossed in gold at the corner. A faint trace of cologne pressed itself up out of the flap when I slid it with my thumbnail. Liam nodded smugly. "We couldn't resist," he said, smirking just enough to hide. "Go on, Henry." Inside, on an invitation beveled as if it needed a tuxedo, someone had written in a hand that pretended to be personal. "Please join us in the grand lobby to celebrate Sophia Croft's 9th birthday. Saturday the 22nd at 1 o'clock. Family and friends." A small note beneath, in Isabella's tidy, not-quite script. "Dad, Sophia wants you there. Don't be late. She draws a cupcake by your name." I looked at Sophia. She is not a girl who draws cupcakes by accident. She leaned in, eyes bright as if I might say what no one says to a child in rooms like these. I choose you over the marble. I choose you over the sharp edges. I could say only, I'll be there. It hung in the air like a promise and a threat, which all promises are in rooms where we have learned to behave. Liam clapped once, a sound like a gavel. You'll love what we've done with the place, he said. We've improved the lobby display since you visited last. He glanced at Isabella then, a flicker of something in his jaw. The last time I had visited, I had not reached the lobby. He had intercepted me on the steps and called me, in a voice that beckoned attention, a vagabond. And the staff had looked away as if they were trained to save their eyes for paying faces. Isabella did not meet my gaze. She set the invitation beside my plate. The edge of the paper made a neat white line against the dark wood. It would mean a lot, she said. I lifted my cup. You have it, I replied. It sounded like affection. It sounded almost like surrender. Sophia hugged me so tightly my ribs remembered what holding felt like. That was the night the clock stopped. Not on the wall behind Liam. Those clocks were the sort that can be replaced by pointing at a catalog. The clock, I mean, lives in my pocket, brass and loyalty. It belonged to my father, belonged later to Isabella's mother, and then to me, when grief turned its paperwork over in the kitchen and said, sign here where it says survivor. Waltham, circa 1918, with an irrationally handsome tick. I used to let my wife, before the hospital smell claimed all our words set the time. She liked it 2 minutes fast. So I can arrive early for once, she'd say, and the watch would humor her. Time itself bent a little to please her. Isabella, at 16, had asked me if she could keep it. She had said it would be like carrying her mother's voice in her pocket. I had hesitated. Our house was all hesitation then, and handed it over on the condition that when she needed to be cruel to someone, she would tell the truth instead. People prefer lies. They think cruelty comes looking like honesty, and so they forgive it more easily. Isabella, at 16, promised. 10 years and a certain man later, the watch moved to a glass case in the Croftgrand's lobby, half hidden among photographs of famous guests who had stayed precisely long enough. The brass face baked under lights. The small sign mispronounced my mother's maiden name and claimed the watch had belonged to a pioneer innkeeper associated with the Croft lineage. I would have laughed if laughter weren't a finite resource. I did not confront her that day. I arrived at the hotel with a small bouquet, the grocery store kind that carries no message but decency, and the security guard at the top of the steps told me the lobby was reserved for guests only. When I said I was family, the words felt rusty. Liam stepped forward from the mirrors and said, with a voice sharpened for public work, we have a brand to maintain, Henry. And then for the gathered audience, we don't open our doors to vagabonds. That word, used with the carelessness of a bourbon, poured too fast. Vagabond. In a city where nearly everyone's grandfather stepped ashore from a ship or a bus with pockets full of weather and hope. Vagabond, about the man who taught your wife to ride a bike beside False Creek. The man who gave you the only good advice you've ever followed. Pay your contractors on time, and they'll save your neck when the inspector shows up uninvited. I turned away. The bouquet found a trash bin. The watch, glowing stupidly in its case, ticked on. There are sounds you don't forget. The snap of a glove before a doctor speaks your name. The sigh of a woman you love when she believes you cannot hear her. The way a word splits a room. And there's another, softer, but equal. The scratch of a pen on cheap paper as a plan arrives dressed as a shopping list. The invitation to Sophia's 9th birthday was the trigger, but the gun had been loaded for years. When I got home, the house greeted me with its usual habits. The stairs creaked only at the 3rd and 7th step. The kitchen smelled like tea and rain. Mrs. Kwan's basil, the neighbor's basil, was practically a character in my life, leaned toward the window over the sink as if it were trying to read the sky. I opened the drawer where I keep my tools, rubber bands, envelopes, tax receipts from a decade of almosts, and took out the ledger. It's not the modern kind that pretends to have a personality and lives in the cloud. Mine is an old paper thing with lines and a binding that learned to heal itself. It used to belong to my wife. She kept grocery lists and the names of friends who would accept a casserole without fuss. After she died, the ledger sat under the toaster for a year, a quiet square of grief. Then, one day I wrote on the first page, things to own before I die. It was a dangerous sentence. But you learn to greet danger with cups of tea and lists. I wrote, a company. Not the kind that needs me more than I needed, but the kind that wears my name when I'm asleep. I wrote, a building that won't be asked to move. I wrote, a watch in the right pocket. I was 64 when I started who I became. I'm older now, which will surprise no one. In those early weeks, I visited the city archives where I had once worked as a temp when Isabella was a toddler and money felt like a parent we were on visitation with. I sat at the long table that smells of erasers and decade-old dust. My hands remembered the choreography of paper. If you know where to look, Vancouver leaves its secrets in plain view. Permits, variances, lean stacks of paperwork with the shy bravado of bureaucrats, all names and dates, as if truth just needed a ledger. I requested files. I used the old relationships. Archivists don't forget the names of people who treat paper gently. I learned which city inspectors signed on Fridays, which contractors filed 2 copies by accident when one would do. Patterns appear if you're patient enough to allow them to arrive unchanged. I was very patient. At night, I worked at my small desk beside the window and watched the neighborhood invent its exhaustion anew. The buses exhaled, even when empty. The street light across the way clicked on a fraction too late to keep the darkness from taking the first step. I mapped shell companies with names that rhymed with Virtue Morningside, Silver Birch, Horizon 9, until the map looked like a nervous system. There it was, Croft Hospitality, the sheen, the shine and the delicate understructure that held it together. Debt nested in debt. Off-book arrangements smirking from behind men who gleamed. Liam had always smelled faintly of new money and old insecurity. He had the voice for a TED Talk and the hands of a man who doesn't carry boxes. He wanted admiring rooms. That was his backstory, his mother talking about leaving and never leaving. His father working the docks and coming home with a shoulder like a broken promise. His goal in every episode of his life was the same, to make a space so polished that looking at it, you could mistake it for love. And the flow of his emotions was always upward until threatened. Then, he dove like a bird mistaking a window for sky. Isabella, let me be generous and precise, grew into her disdain the way others grow into shoes. Slowly, uncomfortably at first, then with the fierce comfort of something that keeps you taller than you are. When she was a girl, she had a plan to open a shop that sold books and tea and jokes at the door. She liked to say things like, you can tell who a person will be by how they treat a mug. She believed the world ran on kindness, just quietly. Then kindness disappointed her. The first landlord claimed the drain repair came out of the damage deposit. The first investor wanted to date the dream. She learned how to say no with a smile that kept teeth out of view. Then Liam taught her that smiles can be capital if you aim them at someone who needs to be seen. She despised my thrift because it reminded her she began with nothing but a pocket watch and 2 competent hands. A goal no secret, even to me, was to never be small again. Not in rooms, not in stories, not in anyone's memory. She aimed her feelings the way others aim cutlery, cutting cleanly, leaving the mess to be wiped by others. Mrs. Kwan knocked on my door the next morning with a container of congee and her granddaughter at her elbow. You look, she said, like someone who slept inside his shoes. She's the kind of woman who can both comfort you and extract the confession without raising her voice. Widowed 5 summers ago, retired nurse, emigrated from Hong Kong in the 80s when ambition wore practical shoes. Her secret is not a secret if you cook with her. She lost her only son to a rumor gambling. The wrong men, money that smelled like police. She tends to basil because it's the one thing that thrives if you speak to it as though plants understand shame. Her goal that morning, insert herself into my day with enough starch and ginger to stop me from making the kind of mistake that can't be corrected with salt. She moved from concern to irritation to a fierce quiet that is, I've learned, the shape of love when it isn't allowed to brag. Tell me, she said, setting the container on my stove. Tell me what you are planning to do at that hotel. Attend a birthday party? I said. She looked at the ledger on the table, at the columns of dates and numbers that might as well have been cuneiform to anyone not married to obsession. Yes, she said dryly, and I intend to start ballet. I poured tea. The steam rose like a suggestion. They put her mother's watch in a case and called it theirs, I said. I allowed myself that sentence, then closed the door on the others. Mrs. Kwan nodded, unsentimental. I would burn the building down, she said conversationally. So you will do something else, more difficult, more permanent, better for the fire department. Something like that, I said. She set chopsticks across 2 bowls, precise in her small altars to competence. Keep the child out of it, she said. If you can. She did not have to explain the flow of her emotions. Alarm at my face, a spike of remembered grief, cooling into determined pragmatism. Nurses know the temperature of harm. I promised nothing. In the kitchen, the basil leaned closer to hear. To build something in Vancouver, you start with a blank facade and a ready smile. Then you find your first demolition. Croft Hospitality had bought its way into rooms too expensive to remember the life that predated chandeliers. Behind the scenes, it leaned on contractors who were helpful in the way men are helpful when money arrives late. They floated cash across months the way ghosts float across photographs, visible to the people who know where to look. Liam had set up trusts and shells the way a boy sets up toy soldiers. He liked the look of rank and file, the sense of design. He bribed, but gently. He called it moving grease through gears. He lived always on the side of the line where the lighting is flattering. I registered Pinnacle Developments with a liar whose handshake felt like a deliberate absence. The name was a joke only, I told. Pinnacles are lonely. The view is expensive, and you stand there out of breath with no one to listen. The paper trail led to subsidiaries with names I chose in a moment of private comedy. Quiet Harbor, Plain Sight, Kettle and Nail. I banked with a credit union because I wanted the kind of clerk who notices when you look tired. My skill, if it can be called that, is not ruthless cunning or supernatural charm. I read paper like a radiologist reads shadows. I learned this in the archives, where history arrives as boxes of arguments and reproaches. If you want to understand a city, sit with its complaints. Smell the mold. Count the times the same name reappears. Note the addresses that drift between owners, as if they were looking for someone to like them. I bought the first building because no one else wanted it. Hastings near Maine, a place that apologized to itself. It had been a tailor shop, then a dance studio, then a church of a modest and portable God. The roof leaked in a way that assumed you would forgive it. The owner had never forgiven the city for forcing him to put a ramp in. I didn't haggle. The day the papers were signed, I stood in the empty back room and felt the way the light tried to make friends with the floorboards. I didn't move for a long time. From there, it was steady as a metronome. I moved through neighborhoods that pretended to be indifferent. Mount Pleasant, the edges of Kitts, a sliver of land by the river no one thought would ever be useful again. If you want a city, buy its shame. It can be polished. With each purchase, I hired locally. Trades. People who understand that a wall is a wall until you lay a hand on it and it becomes a promise. I paid them on time. I visited the sites with coffee that did not taste like regret. A contractor named Colleen became indispensable in the way competence is a drug. She was a woman in her 40s who had operated for years under men's last names. A structural engineer by training who left the big firms after her divorce when her supervisor said her custody weekends made her unavailable for challenging projects. Her son drew robots in the dust when she brought him to job sites. Her backstory had the crackle of tinder. Her goal, crisp, build something solid enough to make her boy feel at home. The flow of her emotions in our first meeting went like this. Suspicion, another older man pretending not to underestimate her. Curiosity, he asks sensible questions. Respect, he listens and says please. And a solemn, tempered optimism that she hid under a shrug. We made a set of rules, Colleen and I, codified in the ledger in my curved handwriting. The tool room is everyone's. Late payments are a confession. No laptops on ladders, soup on Wednesdays. Men laughed at the soup. Then they ate the soup and stopped laughing. I copied the Croft model, then removed its heart. Where Liam exchanged favors with inspectors, I invited them for a walk through and made sure the walls did not wobble. Where he layered debt, I paid cash whenever the math made sense. Where he outsourced, I hired a caretaker named Nora for each building someone with keys and memory. Nora was 59 with silver in her hair and a voice made of patience. She'd managed a supportive housing building for years until a new owner declared empathy and efficiency. Her secret, a brother with schizophrenia she visited every Sunday. Her goal, to make each hallway the kind that doesn't multiply voices. Her emotional arc at work, weary, then bracing, then quietly satisfied when a tenant planted a tomato without an apology. A rumor began. Pinnacle wasn't a company. It was a benevolent ghost. Papers filed on time. Rents raised slowly, then not at all if the roof had leaked first. Old buildings acquired a new trick staying. And somehow I acquired, through the small calculus of fairness, a network of plumbers who could be counted on at midnight, electricians who protected one another's pride, and inspectors who knew where to look and looked anyway. Years passed. The Croft Hospitality Group accumulated awards whose criteria I distrust by default. Most visionary lobby, excellence in curated experience, philanthropy through proximity. Behind the gloss, the ledger in my drawer grew heavy. I tracked Liam's variance applications, the unusual frequency of expedited permits, the contractors who appeared on Croft sites and then vanished after the final invoice was ignored long enough to deafen memory. I have been accused by the Mirror of plotting the way other men garden. But gardens are a kind of revenge too, against entropy, against the assumption that nothing can be coaxed into sweetness again. You will have noticed, I am not good at forgiveness. This is a failing woven into the rope I use to pull myself up. Age has a way of revealing which parts of you are stairs and which parts are rails. The stairs you climb, the rails you grip when the world moves too fast. On the morning of Sophia's birthday, I ironed a shirt that could pass in glossy rooms without drawing a spotlight. I polished the watch and returned it to my pocket, where it implied a heartbeat. The basil on the windowsill, nosy and green, watched me as if it were rehearsing a speech. Mrs. Kwan intercepted me at the sidewalk. "Be polite," she said, as if I needed instruction on how to breathe. "Be cruel, if you must, but never in front of the child." She adjusted my collar, the way a mother bears the memory of a child no longer there to adjust back. "I hear you," I said. "The trick of age is pretending you obey the good advice you solicit." The Croft Grand Vancouver stands like an apology for the neighborhood it displaced. The lobby pretends it doesn't know what happened to the people who were here before mirrors learned to multiply them into insignificance. I climbed the steps. My hands did not shake. The doorman smiled with his mouth. Liam, already in performance mode, extended a hand that assumed cameras. "Henry," he said, teeth on display. "Glad you could make it." I looked at his hand and then at the watch in my pocket. "I brought something," I said. The lobby was full of arrangements that believed they were flowers. Tall guests hovered, their shoes doing the work their voices avoided. Isabella, in a dress the color of promotions, stood beside a cake with a ribbon that would have taught any ribbon what ambition should look like. Sophia, in a yellow dress that captured sunlight and made it obey, saw me and ran. She is not a child who walks to love. She arrives. She collides with it. "You came," she said. Her face made a map that led to something truer than marble. "Of course I did," I said. Isabella's smile had the shakiness of a bridge under too much traffic. "Dad," she said, and kissed my cheek as though remembering the choreography. "Thank you." We followed the protocol required by the lobby's opinion of itself. Small talk, flattery presented like nibbles, and the silent test of how much I could be shaved down by wealthy eyes without squeaking. I passed through them the way fog moves in, indifferent, dampening, impossible to pin. At 1 o'clock, Liam stepped onto the small platform that had appeared as if the lobby birthed it. He clapped for attention he already possessed. "Friends, family," he said. "Thank you for being here to celebrate our Sophia. 9 years old today, and already more gracious than her grandfather." A ripple of something laughter? "Keep an eye on him," passed through the crowd. He loved this. He loved to shape the weather. The speech was a train. It moved whether I was ready or not. He spoke of the Croft legacy, a word whose meaning he had built from mirrors. He spoke of community partnerships and sustainability, as if the silk wrap on the subject mattered more than its bones. He announced, with the benevolence of men who measure love in dollars, that the Croft Hospitality Group had been acquired. A strategic sale, he said, to enable growth, expand our philanthropic commitments, and ensure Vancouver continues to have a home for excellence. He paused. He liked the word excellence. It made him feel part of a club with a Latin motto. 250 million, he said, as if numbers were a kind of applause. The room obliged. Then, Isabella's turn. My father, she began, and her voice nearly broke open. He has always tried. That pause held a suitcase. And we'll make sure he never has to worry again. The Croft family takes care of its own. Her eyes met mine and held. She meant it. That was the problem. She believed magnanimity was a species of love, and that money's warmth could replace the radiator of fidelity. I let the room complete its noise. I let her swallow. Then I set my teacup on the tray of a passing waiter and stepped into the lobby's wide mouth. The marble under my shoes remembered something. It remembered my feet, once denied it. The watch in my pocket ticked like a polite bomb. I have something to add, I said. No microphone needed. There are voices you cultivate in kitchens when a child is sleeping. They carry when they must. The doorman moved toward me, uncertain which script this was. Liam smiled with the thinness of a man whose tailor forgot a seam. Henry, he said. Grin tightened. Let's not. It'll be quick, I said. The new owner should say hello. The pause that followed grew legs and walked through the lobby. It climbed stairs and entered even the rooms not yet built. Isabella's mouth opened and closed in a silent prayer for me to stop being myself. Liam swallowed. The mirrors tightened their muscles. I stood with my hands at my sides. Pinnacle Developments, I said. You've heard of it. Many had. Rumors have been tapping at the city like rain at a window. It will take some getting used to, I suppose. The Croft Grand Vancouver, owned by a company led by, I paused to let the word we had all rehearsed together resurface. A vagabond. In irony's spotlight, I watched Liam flinch. My daughter's carefully composed regret fractured. Then, like the surface of a lake when a stone finally remembers gravity. Sophia looked from her mother to me to the cake, as if the sweetness might translate. I took from my pocket the watch. The faces nearest me inhaled. The glass case on its pedestal hummed dully, suddenly embarrassed by its vacancy. This is how time keeps us honest, I said. You said it 2 minutes fast because you don't want to disappoint the person waiting at the other end. Or you said it 2 minutes slow because you think you're owed. Either way, the watch knows. It ticks whether we notice. Before the room could decide which metaphor to clap for, I turned to Liam. The auditors will be in touch, I said. It's a terrible thing how repeat invoices can look legitimate if you tilt your head. How a change order can travel through 3 subcontractors and still smell like the first lie. I kept my voice empty of drama. It was all one needs to do when holding a fact that has practiced its posture. The licensing file for your expedited permits is tender, fragile. The emails are embarrassingly artful. Gifts that look innocent until someone adds up the dates. I did not list the inspectors by name that would come later in private rooms with serious tables. I did not mention the contractor who found himself working overtime on a city official's cabin, paid in gift certificates and promises of future contracts. I did not mention the file I had left in a safe kitchen where another safe woman would open it, her mouth steady. I merely looked at Liam until he understood the difference between reputation and evidence. There are, he began, perfectly legitimate, Isabella whispered, Liam. And the whisper was an earthquake where she was standing. This is a birthday party, he said, color rising in his cheeks as if the room had forgotten to adjust its thermostat. It is, I said gently. And after cake, there's always the bit where you open the presents. I placed the watch in Sophia's palm and closed her small fingers over it. This is yours, I said. 2 minutes fast, if you please. Your grandmother's rule. The room needed a shepherd. It didn't have one. People shifted, pretended to look for the washroom, pretended to answer phones that had not rung. The manager of the lobby, clever woman, an expert in oxygen, signaled to someone. The piano, obedient, began to play a version of Happy Birthday that believed it was classical. Isabella's face, this is the part I still dream, did not crumple. She did not fall into remorse like the actor she is not. The mask she wore trembled, but did not drop. Something else happened. She looked at me and found, for a moment, the door we used to use. In that glance, I saw the 16-year-old who believed a watch could protect her from grief. The anger that followed rapid reddening was the anger of a woman who realized too late which god she had worshipped. I stepped back. "We'll be in touch," I said to the room. "It will be civil." Then I looked at Sophia. "Save me a corner piece," I said, because even in war, frosting is frosting. They say time heals. Time does not. People do, sometimes. Or they don't, and they grow elaborate compensations instead. The weeks after the party were busy with other people's calendars. Lawyers made themselves available the way tides do, predictably, but indifferent to individual drowning. Journalists called, sniffing reputations the way dogs sniff wind. The investigation took on shapes I recognized because I had drawn them. Liam's contractors began to remember the names of cousins who had received unusual checks. City staff received anonymous gifts of documentation chain of custody perfect, unadorned by opinion. The Croft board, a delicate creature unused to eating, was asked to chew. They did not like the taste. The symbol of all this madness, the watch ticked in my kitchen. Sophia kept it safe on weekends when she slept in my guest room under a quilt whose colors refused to coordinate. She brought it to school once in a small tin. And her teacher, a woman named Claire, who had taught her own mother to demand quiet when multiplying, sent me a note to say it had been safely returned, and that history is luckier in some hands. Claire's backstory was in her handwriting, rounded and open, the kind of script that must have been forged out of hardship she refuses to weaponize. Her goal in that episode was simply to keep the watch from being knocked beneath a desk. Her emotional arc, warm gives anxious, gives relieved and amused at herself for the panic she had felt over a thing ticking in a box. Isabella asked to meet. She didn't plead. Pleading requires acceptance of a lower ground. She requested an appointment, as if we were colleagues. We chose a coffee shop near the water where people pretend they're on holiday. She arrived early, makeup broadcasting composure. She ordered a cappuccino and didn't touch it. "I did not know about the permits," she said. She looked tired around the edges. The kind of tired you can't powder. I knew we were moving quickly. I believed Liam when he said the city admired efficiency. That would require the city to be something it has never been, I said. She set her cup down and adjusted it to align with the sugar packet's corner. "You humiliated him," she said, voice low but steady. "In front of everyone." "I spoke in front of everyone," I said. "He did the humiliating himself." Her mouth turned downward the way a person turns down a bed, resigned. "I thought you'd be happy for me," she said, and there it was, the child voice, muffled by a decade of marble. "Happy for you?" I heard a man 2 tables over gasp, because sometimes life is theater, and we are all complicit. "You called me an embarrassment by proxy," I said. "You let a man put your mother's watch under glass and call it his ancestors. You watched him take my presence at the door as an opportunity for a performance. You want me to be happy for the price you got for your piece of the city? I'm not a price, Isabella." Her eyes shined. She would not cry. Her relationship to tears had become political. They appeared only when they could change a vote. "I'm sorry," she said. I thought if I pushed hard enough, the past would." Agreed to become legend. I didn't want to look back because when I look back, I see her. I hear her. And hear her backstory lay down in the booth next to us and put its head in her lap. Her mother's dying had been a long hallway, and maybe I had not lit it well enough. Maybe I had told her she'd be fine when the dust had not yet learned the shape of her name. Her goal, then and now, was simple: less pain. The flow of her feelings in that conversation was a slow unspooling of something she had held tight for years. Denial thawing into grief, anger flashing and then confusing itself into humility that felt borrowed. "I can give you a job," I said. "There are sentences that erase other sentences. Start at the desk. Learn the difference between the smell of fresh paint and mold, disguised as new drywall. Learn the names of the night staff and the woman who cleans the bathrooms on Christmas morning. Learn what a plumber's hands look like in January. Work your way into a life that knows what work is. We'll discuss the rest later." She blinked. Humiliation and defiance wrestled and both lost. A junior supervisor, she said, tasting the words for splinters. Dad, I have a degree in hospitality. I have managed. You have performed, I said. Now manage. She was silent long enough to read the walls for sympathy. The walls were unhelpful. Is this revenge? She asked finally. Revenge, I said, and let the words sit between us. Sometimes it's an education with a grade you don't get to see. Sometimes it's the only clean line available. Sometimes it's the same thing as justice, but in a better suit. Say you forgive me, she said abruptly, startling even herself. Say it. Say, I forgive you. I forgive you, I said, because it cost me nothing and cost me everything. I forgive you, Isabella. My voice was a bench. It held her weight in mine and still looked as if it could crack. She nodded once, businesslike. She gathered her bag and stood. I will think about the job, she said. Tell Sophia I love her. She left the coffee untouched. A small leaf of foam clung to the cup's rim like a failed attempt at art. At home, I wrote in the ledger, forgiveness granted, contingency pending, underlined twice. Running what you've built is a different skill than building it. As CEO of the thing I had drawn into existence, I found I preferred the mornings when the office was empty and the city had not yet told its daily lie good morning. We are all fine. Nothing is collapsing behind the walls. The first decision I made, ceremonially, was to remove the glass case. No plaque explained the absence. Where the watch had glowed idiotically, we placed a plant Nora recommended for its forgiveness of inattention. It thrives when you're decent to it, she said. It survives when you forget. I made rounds. I practiced the skill I had when Isabella was a child, to enter rooms and simply witness without becoming immediately useful. It's an art. It looks like idleness and ends up being something like faith. A woman named Shanti took to me because she recognized the species of grief that refuses to be repotted. She worked nights at the desk at one of our smaller properties, a quiet place favored by visiting professors and guilty men. She had arrived in Canada from Colombo after a marriage that had taught her precisely how sturdy she was. Her secret was how much she still loved steel spoons. She said they do not break when the world does. She wanted the stability that comes from being, finally, unremarkable. Her emotional life on any given shift went from vigilant to numbed to the small spike of joy that happens when a guest says, "Thank you," as if it is a word to be believed. People say CEOs who are respected are feared. I tried for a different shape. I wanted to be a rumor that brought people good luck. I wanted to be the man whose presence made a room behave, which means sometimes I had to be frightening. One afternoon, I met with a supplier who believed invoices could be friends with imagination. He smiled a lot, as if teeth can persuade math to lie. "We do volume discounts," he said, with the air of a preacher selling an afterlife. "Of course," I said. "We'll start with honesty and see how much it costs." He blinked and revised his rate. When he left, I noted in the ledger, "Glamour is the mask debt wears to keep strangers from flinching." Liam, divorced, held a press conference where he described his departure as a pivot into new opportunities. I watched the live stream with the sound off and could tell by the furrow in his brow which questions scared him. The ones about bank accounts whose names blushed easily. The ones about charity events that funneled proceeds into operational costs. He was resilient in the way narcissists are resilient. He sought the next mirror, which is to say, I did not ruin him. I only set the timer on the life he had made and passed him the watch. Isabella arrived on a Tuesday in slacks that had an argument with humility. She reported to the assistant manager at a property off Robson, as I had arranged. I saw to it that a trainer named May, a woman in her 30s with an efficient warmth, took her through the schedule. "We're starting you on nights," May said. "You will learn more when the world is not pretending to be awake." Isabella took the assignment like a pill she had no water for. I watched, through glass, as she signed forms. The pencil left an imprint on her fingers that a boardroom never would. She did not speak to me that week. On Friday, I found a note slid under my door. It was written on paper torn from a memo pad, the jagged edge like a shoreline. I read, "I will do it. Do not speak to me as if I am a guest. The signature was a struggle between the girl who looped hearts and the woman who refused to gift anyone the intimacy of her first name. Mrs. Kwan, grilled fish that night and fed me as if strife burns more calories. She is doing it, she observed, blowing on a spoonful of soup that had not asked for mercy. She will hate you for it, and then perhaps she will hate herself, and then maybe she will hate no one for 5 minutes. That is when you buy her shoes. I don't buy my daughter's forgiveness, I said. You buy her shoes, she said, because her feet hurt. It is mercy without confession. I told her about the letter that had arrived at my office, an envelope with no return address, heavy with the kind of paper that shuts doors when it closes. Inside, a single sheet, an account number I recognized as one of the city officials' private accounts, and a list of dates. The handwriting was careful, but not practiced. A woman's, perhaps, or a man's who had been taught to survive scrutiny. It was evidence I could use without asking too many questions. Someone is confessing, she said. Perhaps to you because you use a pen. She studied my face. You are tired, she added, a fact unrelated to permission. Leave the basil with me this weekend. It will sulk when you're gone. Sophia spent Saturdays with me now, when Isabella worked. We visited the library where better people than me had built a staircase that made you feel noble for climbing it. We bought donuts and ate them without apology. She asked me once, in her precise tone that will someday overturn a government, "Why does Mom say you are stubborn?" "Because I took practice," I said. The things you want to be will not appear because you named them. You must practice until even the bones are bored. She accepted that. Children accept what carries the rods of certainty. She glanced at the watch and set it 2 minutes fast. Like Grandma, she said, so I can arrive early for once. She smiled and I looked away because some expressions are too bright to stare at directly. In the evening, she read on the couch while I answered emails and wrote in the ledger. An investor from Toronto wanted to take Pinnacle public, a word that felt like a window I did not trust. Colleen needed decision authority on 3 projects where contractors had begun to test her. I answered, she has it. Do not make me embarrass your sons. Nora requested permission to hire a young man named Pascal as a night porter. He had a past that would make the risk-averse cringe. He is gel with trash, she wrote, and I underlined that because it might be the only job qualification that matters. The phone rang at 9. I do not answer unknown numbers at night. It is a rule so old it grew hairs. But Sophia was asleep against my shoulder, the watch ticking a little faster than honesty, and I lifted the receiver. Mr. Walsh? The voice was smaller than its determination. My name is Angela Soto. We haven't met. People rarely call to say we haven't met if they intend to keep it that way. I kept my voice patient. How can I help you, Miss Soto? I was the scheduler, she said in a rush, for the Parks and Permits office. For 3 years. I resigned last month. She swallowed sound. I could hear it. I think I have some things you should see. It's about the Croft variances. And other things. I don't want to send them. I want to hand them to a person and know the shape of their face when they read. This will not be safe for you, I said. It's a sentence one must say out loud, even when it's not a warning, but a weather report. I know, she said. I am tired of being safe at the expense of being intact. Her backstory arrived like a paper plane. Immigrant, first in her family to join the city. Proud until pride became compromise. Learned that complicity has great dental benefits and terrible dreams. Her goal, to reclaim a self that would look at her in the mirror without blinking. Her emotional arc in the conversation. Fear gives urgency, gives something like relief when her name sounded less like a question in my mouth. Come to my office, I said. Tomorrow early. The kind of early that makes your neighbors assume you are cheating. She laughed, startled by herself. I can do that, she said. She gave me a time that was 2 minutes before 7. I did not tell her what I would do with those minutes. When I hung up, Sophia shifted in her sleep and muttered a sentence from a dream I would have liked to rent for a night but never own. We're keeping the cake forever. I kissed her hair, which smelled of library books and the hot sugar of donuts. The ledger sat open on the table, my handwriting steady. I wrote Angela, safe place, good coffee, closed door. And beneath that, be careful who you become when the plan likes you. Let me be honest. Victory is a dangerous room. The lighting makes you look better than you are. It whispers that you are invincible. and you begin to walk in ways that require flutes. This is where villains live, in the belief that triumph makes them moral. I have been careful for decades. Care is heavy, and one morning you might set it down without meaning to. Angela arrived early, hair pulled back into a bun a teacher would approve. Her eyes scanned the hallway the way deer scan a meadow. She wore a backpack too new to be anything but a disguise. In the conference room, the one with a window that shows the city, the version of itself it would like to frame, I offered her coffee. She declined. The sound of her breath filled spaces where my other guests preferred small talk to denial. She placed the backpack on the table. From it, 3 binders emerged, the kind that professionals pretend were assembled by machines. Each tab had a month and a code name. She had thought this through. The notes in the binder were in a hand that wanted to be calm. When she spoke, her sentences were precise, but sometimes a name an official. A contractor hiccuped out of her mouth as if the word were a small animal trying to escape. "Here," she said, and showed me emails where a city planner joked that the Croft variance approvals had their own floor at City Hall. "Here," she said, and showed me the change orders that moved through shell companies like dollar bills moving from palm to palm so quickly you believed they were dancing. "Here," and her finger hovered. "Here's the cabin." I had heard of a cabin because men who hide things like to pretend they are rustic. The photos printed on satin paper that reflected the room, like a reluctant witness, showed the cabin's spine, an A-frame so photogenic you would forgive it for holding secrets. Work orders, invoices, a timeline that made city overtime blush. Angela's face as I read went from steel to something like grief. "Tell me why you left," I said when the binders emptied themselves. "I heard jokes," she said. "I made some. Jokes cover shame." Then at night, I started seeing faces. The men who worked doubles at the plant. The woman who brought coffee to the front desk at my building and looked like she hadn't slept through a night since our mayor decided housing was a buffet. I thought, I'm helping the wrong team win. And that thought made me sick. She glanced up sharply, as if daring me to pat her head. "I'm not noble," she said. "I stayed because the dentist. My mother's medication. My brother's trouble. I stayed until I couldn't." Her goal brutally simple. Stop being a liar. I did not praise her. Praise would have turned this into a story she might later try to sell to herself. I opened the ledger and wrote a phone number. "Call this journalist," I said. "She is the kind who eats quietly and writes in a voice that makes the guilty feel like they are slowly getting a headache. She does not show you drafts. She does not like muffins. Bring her one anyway." I tore the page out and handed it to Angela. "Keep the binders," I added. "If anyone asks, you do not have the originals." She exhaled a sound I have only heard in churches. "Thank you," she said. Then, as an afterthought that weighed as much as everything else, "Be careful." "Always," I said. After she left, I stood at the window and allowed the city to lie to me. The lie is that it is permanent. The truth is that every building is just a very patient way to fall down. Isabella lasted 2 weeks before she knocked on my door. Not at home. In the office. The knock was a sentence. "I am not my husband, and I am not the girl you want me to be." She stepped inside dressed in the uniform of competence. Nothing that could be called pretty by a man and dismissed by a woman. She sat and folded her hands in her lap, as if they were meeting each other for the first time. "I can do it," she said without preface. "I know I can." Her eyes were almost wild. She had met the version of work that does not applaud, and she wanted no one to witness the bruise. "But I hate you for making me." Breath. "I hate me for needing you to." We sat in that. I will not dramatize silence. It is not a stage direction. It is a kind of weather. "I know how to run a lobby," she continued, fixing her gaze on a point in the middle distance where self-respect performs for small crowds. "I do not know how to clean vomit from a carpet without judgment. May taught me. She doesn't talk when she cleans. She just completes. I judge myself." I realized how much of my days were spent avoiding completion. The corner of her mouth twitched at the cruelty of that insight. "I thought rich meant done. It means you hire someone else to finish." "You can hate me," I said. "The job doesn't care." She sniffed. "Mom would hate this," she said. A sudden leap into a river we had avoided. She loved you too much to let you turn into a man who tempts people to become better. She smiled, a small pain. Then again, she would be the one to wear the uniform and show us all how stupid our faces looked when we were too proud to ask where the extra garbage bags were. It was the first time she had brought her mother into a sentence with me since the funeral. I felt the watch heavy in my pocket, 2 minutes fast. I wanted to say, everything we have done to each other has been in reaction to a person who is not here to laugh at us. Instead, I said, soup on Wednesdays. What? There's soup in the staff kitchen on Wednesdays, I said. Nora makes enough for everyone. She doesn't force you to eat. But she looks at you if you don't. Isabella laughed, a sound she hadn't used in months. Nora, she said, tasting the unfamiliar dignity of a name that would not be in any magazine. She told me the elevator could hear my heels from 3 floors away. I apologized to the elevator. She stood. I will let you know if I quit, she said. Or if I don't. When she left, I wrote in the ledger, tear at the corner. Leave it? It will remind you this is paper, not stone. As for Liam, he sent messages. Men like him do not say please until the world has agreed that the word smells like vulnerability. Then, when backed into a clean wall, they try it out like a tie. He asked to meet for lunch at a restaurant with no prices on the menu. I chose instead the park bench near the waterfront where gulls practice being gods. He wore a jacket that looked rich enough to regret him later. You didn't have to, he said, not removing his sunglasses, as if eye contact were a tax he couldn't afford. You could have handled it quietly. I did, I said. For years, he exhaled a laugh. Fair, he said. You were always good with time. The sunglasses came off then, and I saw the boy who had learned to lie to himself kindly. Look, Henry, he said. What do you want? Branded repentance? He spread his fingers wide, a magician showing nothing up sleeves. I can provide. Stop, I said, and he did, because some words come from a diaphragm that has a different relationship to air. What I want is for you to know there are rooms your voice is not allowed into. Sit at the edge and practice silence until your name learns it isn't a password. He stared at the water. You think you won, he said in the tone of a man rehearsing a line for a documentary he hopes will be sympathetic. I am still me, I said. Victory does not peel that off. He nodded to his credit. He looked older without the lights. She'll forgive you, he said finally, apropos of nothing and everything. She always had a soft spot for men who carried their pain like luggage. Isabella is not mine to predict, I said. He slid the sunglasses on again. We're all someone's to predict, he said, and left, choosing a direction that made him look as though he were walking into an expensive advertisement for solitude. The news broke a week later. Not sacred news, just human noise with facts attached. Emails published redacted enough to tease, invoices arranged in timelines so you could admire their narrative arc. The journalist Angela had called her name as Chelsea, withdrew her kindness in paragraphs. The cabin photo was on the front page of a major paper, like a postcard from a place sincerity avoids. A city official announced a leave that tasted like firing. Liam released a statement that could have been pasted from a PR kit. We apologize for any misinterpretation. I was in the office kitchen when Nora read aloud the headline. People looked at me as if I had just done a magic trick with their rent. I raised my mug in a little gesture of nonchalance. The watch ticked 2 beats louder for no reason other than drama. That afternoon, I found a package on my desk with no return address. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper as though love could cushion the fall, lay the small brass plaque from the lobby display. Prof family heirloom, it read, and then the wrong name, and then the invented story about a pioneer innkeeper whose ghost would surely feel embarrassed about being recruited into a lineage he didn't apply to. There was no note. There didn't need to be. The plaque smelled faintly of lemon oil and admission. I placed it in the ledger like a flattened insect. Then I closed the book and stared at the ceiling until the tiles aligned into a pattern I recognized. There is no winsome way to punish. There is only the shape of the hand you choose. In the evenings, when the office emptied, I returned to the habit that had kept me alive, making tea and pretending it is a plan. The house welcomed me the way inanimate things do when they have no choice. The basil had forgiven me for leaving it. It pretended to grow out of gratitude. I sat at the table and allowed the day to leak out of me. The watch on the table, the plaque on the shelf, the ledger open to a page that read only, "Be careful who you love when you are winning." The knock at the door was gentle enough to be a question. I opened it to find Isabella, hair wet from rain she had not hurried through. She held a pair of shoes in a bag. "Mrs. Kwan said," she began. "I know," I said. "Soup on Wednesdays." She laughed despite herself. "I hate how she sees me," she admitted. "I love it. I will never forgive either of you." She handed me the bag. Inside, sensible shoes. The size I bought her when she was 13 and had decided every discomfort was a necessary part of beauty's fold. "I made a shift change," she said. "It's easier to learn when the city sleeps." "Good," I said. "The city is less performative then." She stepped into the kitchen without waiting for permission. "People who have a claim on you exercise it without checking receipts." She saw the plaque and her mouth did not move. She picked it up, read the lie, and shook her head. "Who sent this?" "Silence," I said. The loudest woman in any room, we ate toast. We did not discuss forgiveness. It is a subject like surgery. Necessary, but better left to people who can make precise cuts without maiming an art. She rose to leave and paused at the door. "There's something else," she said. She reached into her bag and withdrew an envelope with my name on it in the looping script of a child narrator of a bedtime story. The paper smelled like candy. "Sophia wrote this at school," she said. "For you." She made me promise not to read it. "Do not read it in front of me." After she left, I unfolded it. The paper had a drawing of a house that looked like it carried its own sunlight. In the middle, a circle where she'd drawn the watch, large enough to be the moon. The letter said, "Dear Papa Henry, when I am big, I want to work at the desk with you and Nora. I will open doors for people who look like they came in from the rain. I will bring my own mugs. I will make the time go fast. Love, Sophia. P.S. Mom says we are learning a lot. She says you are stubborn like a mountain." I like mountains. They tell clouds where to go. I put the paper beside the ledger. For the first time in months, the kitchen did not feel like a witness but a confidant. That night, at 11:07, the phone rang. I should not have answered. I did. "Mr. Walsh?" The voice was careful, older, scraped raw by duty. "This is Detective Harrow with the Vancouver Police Department. I'm calling about Liam Croft." There are moments when the body knows before the mind decides to let you in. My hand closed around the watch. Time stumbled and then pretended it hadn't meant to. "Yes," I said. "There's been an incident," he said. "We'd like you to come down to the station to answer a few questions." You were named as the last person he called. There was a pause in which the detective made a decision about mercy. He chose to remove it. He left a message. He continued softly, "I think it was for you." I looked at the ledger, at the line I had written, "Be careful who you become when the plan likes you." The watch ticked, 2 minutes fast, as if rushing me toward a door I did not want to open. On the windowsill, the basil leaned into the glass, as if trying to see who was on the line. "Send me the recording," I said. But he had already said the thing that changes a house from a shelter into a stage. "No," he replied, voice registering a fact the city would soon learn to pronounce. "We'd rather you hear it here." Behind him, through the phone, I could hear a room shuffle its papers. The sound was familiar. It was the sound of evidence clearing its throat. I stood, reached for my coat, and for a moment, just a moment, my knees went out like chairs collapsing after a long party. I caught myself on the counter and set the watch in my pocket, careful as a promise. "Detective," I said, as if courtesy could move the furniture of fate. "I'm on my way." The line clicked dead. The house listened. The street leaned toward the door. In my head, the ledger turned a page by itself, and somewhere inside the quiet, a small future unfurled its map and wrote, in ink too dark to be water, "Thank you. Thank you for staying with me, for listening this far. Your attention is a rare and precious gift. Please, do this for me. Follow the channel. Thank you."